For me, this has not been just a business. It's been a way of life. Mary called me into Jim's office. I would like to make you president of our company.
Like, you need advisors around you. You need the right people who kick you in the pants and make you do something that's uncomfortable.
When you got frustrated, you go in and say, what do I need to do next? He said, what you need to do next is show up tomorrow.
We talked about a podcast, writing books, developing content, and then here we are.
My age, looking back, I'm thinking, oh, wow, Lord, thank you for all the ups and downs. This has always brought us through. Michael had just spent 4 years in retail after college in a management training program, and had been fortunately promoted 3 times, and was being promoted again to Indianapolis to open a new store. Mm-hmm. And my wife Susan and I, your mom, decided after much prayer and discussion that we did not want to move. We wanted to stay close to family, and so I loved what I did, but just did not want to move. So I resigned, and had no job. At the time, I was okay with that. Your mom said, honey, just whatever the Lord has in mind for us, I'll back you 100%. And wasn't too long, she read a little ad in the paper just saying new recruiting business starting up, different in Cincinnati, and looking for a few key people. And I answered the ad, and the rest is history.
And did it say starting a recruiting firm starting up that's different?
If your mom were here, she could tell you exactly what it said. I don't remember the details on it, but it sounded intriguing. I had done some college recruiting when I was with Kmart and enjoyed that. So I thought, oh, wow, I like recruiting. And let's check
And were there
that out.
any details? Did it say benefits? Did it say, I think it said something about a company car?
It did say company car. And at that time, we could use a new company car. So that was interesting too.
Yeah. So paint a picture of walking in for that first interview. Like, who was starting the company? Who were the individuals starting the company?
2 individuals, husband and wife, Jim and Mary Morse. Jim was the president of the company. He had just left the company up in New England, managing it, and he had been with them for several years. They were both from Cincinnati, and Mary had worked with him there. They had been married 19 years, and their ages were 19 years apart. Jim was 30. I'm sorry. Let me think about that. Anyway, they wanted to move back to Cincinnati, and they loved the recruiting business, but they didn't want the hassles of a huge recruiting business. They wanted to start small.
And what was normal in that day in the industry in 1975? And were there any things that they were looking to do different, or they just wanted a smaller company?
No, they wanted a smaller company. They were used to probably 100 recruiters, and they wanted a handful of recruiters. They didn't want the busyness, the hassle, the stress that a big company brought. They wanted to just focus in Cincinnati, in the greater Cincinnati area, and they wanted to find a few key people who wanted something different.
And you had some recruiting experience from retail, so they thought, well, this is a young recruiter who wants to come in and learn the business and learn from us. And
Mr. Morse taught me very quickly that it was not what I considered a recruiting business. it was on my final interview, Mr. Morse said to me, Mike, I think you think this is a recruiting business. And I said, yes, sir, I do. And he said, let me clarify. This is a sales business. And the blood kind of drained from my face. He could tell from my demeanor that that was the furthest thing from my mind. That was the first thing I wanted to do is sell. But being a good salesman, he said, let me share with you what my definition of sales is. My definition is simply finding clients with problems and solving them. And when he said that, the blood rushed back up in his head. My antennas went up, and I said, wow, that sounds great. That's something I would love to do.
And was there a moment in the early few months, few quarter, or first couple quarters where you were like, I don't know if this is going to work?
There were many moments.
Walk us through those.
In the first couple of years.
Okay.
That took place. 3 months after we opened on June 4th. 3 months later, I was called into his office, and he said, sit down. Whenever he closed the door, I knew, okay, something's up. And he said, I've just been served a legal injunction.
Like a non-compete?
On a non-compete. I was an officer in the company, and I'm not going to be here for the next 9 months. Now, that won't rock you. So here I just started 3 months ago. I was paid a salary starting out. No one else was. Everyone else was on commission. He said, I've got to put you on commission. At that time, commission did not excite me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what about the company car? And he said, won't be any company car. Love you to stay, but we understand if you decide, but I won't be able to be in the business for 9 months. In that, and I would have probably left if it were not for Mary, his wife, and she was also our office manager, and they made a great team. He was all business, tough, great trainer. Yeah. She was the caring, the culture person that I talked to and stayed. He said, I'll be here, and whatever you need. And she's one of the main reasons that we decided to stay.
In the early days of any startup, it's really, really difficult, right? So that got thrown a curveball. He wasn't totally surprised by it, but possibly was hoping they wouldn't come after him for a non-compete. Did they have any other great challenges thrown at them financially as a startup, or?
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that he came to me again, closed the door and said, I need some help. We have a cash flow problem. This was even before injunction. And he said, we need $10,000 to get us through. And so he said, if you have any ideas, let me know.
Was that for payroll or insurance or all the above?
Probably for all the above. That night I went home and went over to visit my dad and said, Dad, I just need to run something by you. Not for the purpose of getting money, but just give me some advice. And after he listened to what I needed, he said, he didn't say anything. He just walked out of the room. Came back. A few minutes later, with a check for $10,000. And I took that in. I thanked him, took it in next day, gave it to Mr. Morse. And 30 days later, he wrote the check with interest. back to my dad, and he never forgot that.
Hmm.
And that was I think that solidified our relationship there. It was through my dad, but he appreciated that very much from my dad and me.
The Morrises did.
Mm-hmm.
Who was Jim, the founder? So not just as a boss, and then what did he believe? What were his values? What was he trying to instill in you? And what do you think he saw in your characteristics as well?
Yeah. Mr. Morris was all business. I can tell you, he was, I worked for him for 5 years. Couldn't ask for any better training, any more focus. He every morning, Monday through Friday, he held we started at 8:45. At 8:45, he held a training meeting from 8:45 to 9 o'clock every single morning. While we were there, and I learned so much from him. He was a no nonsense guy. Again, that's why his wife Mary was so key for me staying there. She always was great at listening and great at the caring part, and they made a great team. And I loved the team. I probably would not have stayed. If she had not been there, I probably would not have stayed. Loved the training, but just I needed someone who really showed they cared too.
And was there did they end up hiring 3 or 4 people?
I was the first team member, and then the next day they hired another individual who had actual recruiting experience, and he stayed with us for several years. This individual told me 2 weeks later, he said, "Just want to let you know, you'll never make it in this business." And I thought, oh, okay. Well, that wasn't something that I took lightly, and I took that seriously and thinking, okay, I was never the best at anything, but I was like Pete Rose. I worked hard and smart, and I could keep up with anyone. So I said, okay, I'm going to prove that wrong. And
And so, when Jim came to you and said, because you said that he shared with you before he shared about the non-compete, that he has a cash flow problem. So again, he just started the company.
Mm-hmm.
He had a cash flow problem. It's very typical for young entrepreneurs to have cash flow problems in the early days of anything. Did he share that with everybody? Did he just share it with you?
My gut feeling is no. I don't know why. I guess I learned his trust enough to share it with me for whatever reason. He may have shared it with everyone, but I don't think so. But I can't answer why. I just appreciated him sharing it. Made me feel a bigger part of the company, and I was okay hearing, okay, here's a small company that has a challenge. Here's our first big challenge. And I wanted to be part of that solution. Yeah.
And how much, thinking about Paul Pete, or my grandpa, your dad, how much question did he put up when he heard you telling the story about the problem?
No questions.
And then he just stepped out of the room and wrote a check to you or Jim Morris?
No, it was to him. It was to Mr. Morris.
Okay. And he hadn't met him at that time?
Nope.
Okay.
No, he was just that kind of dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's just, I always remember that. And how much I appreciated that and his love for me.
Were you, how quickly did you earn your way through results and drive into equity? Were you an early equity owner?
in part of our training meetings every morning, he would go over a topic of, now every day was different, but also he would measure our results. Both in one, he said the main thing was work attitude.
Mm-hmm.
That was number one. Then it was activity. Then it was results. He told us early on, some of you are going to have a lot of activity and little results. I'm looking for more. If you have, I'm more interested in the results, but some of you have to have a lot of activity, and some of you are going to learn to have less activity but more quality activity and better results. I'm okay either way. We need results at the end of every month. And he was very big on measuring everything. And as soon as I learned that, what he expected, then I was good with that. So I would say within, I don't recall whether it was before he came back or during, I think right after he came back, Jim and Mary again called me aside and said, "We have something for you." They gave me 10 shares of stock. I was the only one. I mean, I learned later that I was the only one they ever did that for. And but I think at that time, my gut feeling is Mary had gone to Jim and said, "Hey, we've got a good one here, and we don't want to lose him." Yeah, because there were plenty of times that the ups and downs of this business are. I had to think and rethink. Okay, wow, Lord, is this really where you want me?
Mm.
And your mom just every time said, "Honey, whatever you feel the Lord wants you to do, I'll back you. Just tell me how to pay the bills, and let's move on."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did.
Your high potential leaders and executives need more. They need someone who will come alongside of them to help them unlock what is holding them back and reach their fullest potential. Our executive coaching matches your leaders with the right coach through our proprietary coach matching process. We focus on real growth with clear goals, frequent check-ins, and measurable results that you see and experience. Whether it's a 6-month engagement or ongoing support, we help your leaders become the executives that they desire and that your organization needs. Visit talentmagnet.com to start the conversation today. Do you describe a little bit more about Mary? So as I describe Mary to friends, to relationships, it's like Mary was growing up. She was a grandmother to us kids. She also was the owner of the company that employed my dad, my parents. But we always thought of her as much as a grandmotherly figure. Like I know family memories where she was with us on trips and various things. Now, I didn't come along till 82. So 75 to 82, a lot happened probably to further galvanize that relationship. But share a little bit more about Mary and those early lessons and characteristics and how she complemented Jim in the early years.
Mary probably, next to my grandmothers and my mom and your mom, was probably the most influential woman that I ever knew. Both for our family and for our business. I said she was a very caring. Yeah, she was a great listener, but she also was someone not to take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
She was very astute, very smart. She listened for understanding and didn't give quaint answers. She she meant what she said, and she thought through it. She knew the business and knew what we needed to do. I was there to help coach us. And then when, most of the family part was after her husband died.
Jim.
Yeah. For 5 years, we just had to stay focused every day. Mr. Morris would say, when you got frustrated, you go in, he said, what do I need to do next? He said, what you need to do next is show up tomorrow and just put more activity on the conveyor belt. You keep doing that, everything else will be fine. And he was right. Yeah.
And then I know just from stories that you've told me, he also challenged everybody with look. I think he told you at some point you need to get a suit, and if you don't have a suit tomorrow, don't come back. And he was pretty direct.
Well, that was probably the first month. Maybe it'd been the first week.
Yeah.
He said, "Do you have a suit?" And at Kmart, I never wore a suit. Sometimes I wore a sports jacket. I said, I'm sorry, I don't have a suit. And what happened was he said, well, you need to go out and buy you a suit. He didn't say, I'll buy you a suit. He said, you need to go out and buy a suit. And at that time, I didn't have money to buy a suit. So I went out and bought a plaid suit. And when I came in, he said, that's great. I need you to go out and buy a blue pinstripe suit. And I did. And that's what I started wearing. He was very wise in how to develop business the way he wanted to develop business. And that was when we went out to clients, when we met business owners, business leaders, CEOs, he wanted us to have a suit. And so that will help you create business. And also he gave me the title of vice president. He said, that goes along with this. That's not a officer role. This is a title to help you create business. And it did. And so, he was starting to teach me how to go out and be a professional in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because other companies in our business either didn't wear, none of them wore suits. Some of them wore sport coats. But he said, "Trust me, we're gonna be different." Yeah, and so one example, we had a fee dispute with another recruiting firm early on, and so I got there early. We were both meeting with the client, and I wanted to see what the other individual was wearing, and he was wearing just a no tie, just a sport coat, and frankly, when I saw him get out of the car, I smiled and said, "Okay." Walked in, and we got, everything was great, and they became a great client. It just was one of those examples that how we were different, just the little things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in business and in our personal professionalism.
And was it normal in that day where you retained search in 75 through 79, 1980?
While Mr. Morse was there, we never had a retained search. It was pure contingency recruiting, and that's all I knew at the time. So yes, it was all contingency. In other words, you got paid when you filled the role.
Okay. And then at the time, were companies paying fees or were candidates paying fees?
At that time when we started, the individuals, it was typical for the individual to pay the fee. From day one, he made it clear that no, our clients, we're looking for clients that will pay the fee. And that's what we did from there on.
So walk me through the, 78 to 81. You mentioned that something happened in life that kind of transitioned the relationship with Mary to be much closer with Jim's passing. Can you walk us through what that means?
Well,
What took place?
there's certain dates in your life that you never forget. May 19th, 1980 was one of those days. One of those nights. I got a call from Mary saying Jim is in the hospital, in emergency, and they need blood donation. And so all of us, all the team members, went and gave blood. And by that morning, he said, if just clarify that early evening, he was out on his riding lawnmower. It had just been sprinkling, and where he lived, there was a little slanted hillside. He had just talked to his dad on the CB radio, who lived in Washington, D.C., and his dad had said, son, don't be on don't do that if it's raining. When Jim was 52 years old at that time. Anyway, he didn't follow his dad's advice, and the riding lawnmower flipped back on him, and gear shift went through his chest, and the doctor said if he survives, he'll be a vegetable. And Mary said no, he would not want that. So he died. He died. That changed everything for the business, and but that again, very tough time for the business and for Mary and for all of us. So right after the funeral, Mary called me into Jim's office and sat down and said, Jim and I had talked about this. I would like to make you president of our company. And I smiled, and I'm thinking to myself, you got to be kidding. I loved helping clients solve problems, and I was very upfront with her. I said, Mary, I appreciate that, but I said we've got three other people here who have been in business and have a lot longer than I have, older, wiser, who could do a better job than I can. And she said, I realize that. I'm not going to question that. But Jim and I had talked, and she said, we decided that we wanted someone, if anything ever happened, we wanted someone who we could trust to do what's best for this business and for her. And I said, oh, wow. So I went, when she said that, I went home and talked to your mom and just, told her what was going on. And we both agreed, hey, we stayed because of Mary, very simply. I loved the business by that time, but we stayed because of Mary. And we wanted to do what was best for the business and for her. And so that's what we did. She called a meeting once accepted that, she called a meeting the next day, had everyone in and said, here's what's going on. She said, I've just made Mike the president of this company. And before anyone, think, your thoughts going on, he's already told me that some of you could do a better job than he can. He doesn't have the experience that you do. However, I've chosen him, and we're moving on. Hope you stay, but if not, I understand, but we're moving on. And that's what we did. We moved on.
before you were president, how would you have defined leadership before you had the title? Like, what did leadership mean to you? What were you learning from Mary and Jim, your dad, your mom, to define leadership?
I guess two words come to mind: character and trust. Yeah, I felt leadership was for me, leadership by example. Jim had never, it wasn't said, but always treated me like, Mike has become the leader because he sets the example here. He's got the attitude, he's got the work ethic, he gets the results. That's what they were looking for. He's got the character, and that was my view of leadership at that moment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How did it change when you became president? Your first year in as that promotion?
I sought a lot of advice from leaders that I respected in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Walt Dunleavy was the Northern Kentucky Chamber president. I went to him. I went to Jim Huff, who had a very successful real estate company. I found other advisors. Anyone that would, sit down with me, I said, help me out. Here's where I am. You've been doing this a long time. Give me your thoughts. And I, listened and learned from every one of them and just started applying them on a day-to-day basis, with our team. And I also started working, I started going out with other team members to see how they were working and see what they needed. I'd become a pretty good business developer by that time, working with clients, developing clients. And so I wanted to find out, okay, how can I help them? It started taking less of me and realizing, okay, it's got to be more of everyone, not just me. Yeah.
When you think through the impact of all of the years for 50 years or the early years around like leaders' lives changing, you just shared a tragedy that Jim had, leadership promotion that you felt you certainly weren't ready for. I always describe to people, it's one of the reasons why we spend so much time working on succession for other companies and other leaders and other family businesses. It's why we love supporting family and private business owners, because we know from our origin story what it's like and what tragedies can come up and things can happen. And I also describe, and my dad got thrusted in to be president with very little direct preparation. There was mentoring and coaching and training, but you had no idea they were going to ask you, because nobody had any idea that something was going to happen to Jim, and Mary didn't want to lead the business by herself. Right. In all of that, how did that change you as a young professional, as a young father, as a young husband? Like, how did all of that incorporate you as a human? And you just said you didn't do it by yourself. You sought out wisdom from others. What other changes took place in your own life?
Michael, I had to look at where we'd been, the last 5 years, and I really, really enjoyed consulting and being business and developing relationships with, again, business owners, key leaders, CEOs, and helping to create business through them and relationships through them. But during all that, and now being asked to serve as president of our company, I realized that God had a different plan. Which I would have been perfectly content staying as a search consultant. Yeah, developing more business. but he had a different plan. And Mary and I talked, and I realized that Mary, I really right now the business needs me to serve two roles. One, president and helping, recruit and develop team, but I also have to bring in business right now. I have to help bring in business. So we have to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And she agreed. She agreed with that totally. And so it was a matter of what we were doing well and what we needed to change, and again seeking internal and external advice on what can we do different to better our company. And that's when I started. I went to a 3-day seminar up in Chicago, riding the train in. I stayed at my sister and brother-in-law's who lived in Chicago, and rode the train in 2 hours every morning for 3 days to get to the seminar downtown. But the seminar was on retained search. And I had done enough contingency recruiting and getting to the last final offer stage and saying, well, we've changed our minds, or whatever, all kinds of things. And I'm thinking, well, we got to change. And that's when I came back after 3 days and said, I held a meeting with the other recruiters and said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go start the retained search. I don't want anyone else doing it. I'm going to do it. And if it fails, then, that's on me. But I believe that that's our future. But you all have to continue doing what we're doing on the contingency side until it's a proven model. And so that's what I did. I did that for a year. Mm-hmm. And realized, wow, that was going to be our future. And that's when I started training the others to change over too. Mm. And within another year, we were all doing, retained search. Mm. Yeah. And and have continued that.
What were the differences? What were the differences then? And then we'll kind of relate to how is that the same or different from now? What was retained search back then? Was that 1983, 84?
Yeah, probably 1983. Again, contingency was what everyone else was doing, mm-hmm. at least in our area.
In the Midwest,
the big cities. Some of those had big search firms that were doing retained. For here, that would be unique and different. And it was being able to sit with a client and say, so how your fees work as well. We work on a retainer, and talk to them about, and knowing that they could say, well, we can get that on a contingency basis. And I said, understand, if you can do that and get the quality service, that you're wanting, understand that. But that's the way we're going to do that. And it was more by that time, once we got to the fee, we were looking for clients who wanted our type of service, quality service, trusting service, and not just resumes and, throw them at me. They wanted us to do a great job of qualifying, and they wanted to trust us. Mm-hmm. Our business has always been a non-trusting business because, just for a lot of reasons, but people didn't trust recruiters. So, I've had bad experiences. In our case, I loved hearing that. You've had a bad experience. Tell us about that. Well, we're going to be different. And if you need to talk to someone, just talk to some of our clients about that. They can answer any questions you have. But we were willing to turn down business if they wanted to stay on a contingency basis. Mm-hmm. And it didn't take long that we built trust in our recruiting and our retainer clients, and went on from there. Mm.
I think it's interesting today as we celebrate our 50th year, that's still the feedback we hear most in the surveys and voice of customers. And unsolicited testimonials, solicited testimonials is the trust, the care, the connection, the desire to know the leader and the leadership team and the vision of the organization and what they're trying to accomplish is still far more important than just placing the person, right? It's about what are you trying to accomplish? What's your dream and aspiration of this company, and how do we help you get there? And happen to do that a lot through people.
Michael, when we started the retained business, even before that, and even the contingency business, we were one of the first firms in Cincinnati to, before we would work with any client, we would go out and meet actually face-to-face with the client. Very few companies did that. They would take a job order over the phone and never meet the client. We said, no, we need to know you. We need to walk your halls and the plant and, anything else. We need to see your people. We want to know how it feels, in your company, because we're going to be looking for someone who doesn't just be able to do the job, but also fits your culture in the company. And that was music to their ears. And then we had to find that individual. It took longer to find that individual than someone who just looked great on the resume, and that built the trust, once we started doing that. And they saw, wow, not just we were different, but our candidates were different. That helped us create more business.
Were there any, call it foundational customers that either really bought in early or we'll test you out, but then became big advocates for the approach?
My first retainer client was with a company called Loft Office Environments. David Connell was the VP of sales there at the time. Later became the president and owner, but at that time, we were recruiting for him on a contingency basis, and I said, David, we are changing to. I know what he said. He said, I love working with you, but because it was a small company at that time, I love working with you, but your fees just tear our budget up. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, we get this big fee and, boom. And I said, so thought about it, went back to him and said, what about this? Here's how much you paid us last year. What if you pay us the same amount this next year, just on a monthly basis, divide that by 12. And he smiled and said, wow, that'll work. Okay. That's all we did different. And so we had to learn to manage cash flow. We weren't getting big, in his case, we weren't getting the big fee. We were getting
a monthly retainer,
and that was one model. And, for a small business. For big companies, they didn't care as much, for that. And by the way, just thinking back, Avon Products was our first big client. We had them for 10 years. And they did not, HR did not want to work with recruiters. HR would say, no, we can do it all ourselves, blah, blah, blah. Well, again, just through building relationships, I recruited a guy from Avon. He answered an ad that we had, and he didn't get the job, but he said, wow, I really love the way you work, and I want you to meet some of our key people. And I told him, I said, well, HR, they won't work with us. And he said, that's fine. So he took me out and met a couple of the operations directors, and then he said, I also want you to meet Tom Rourke. He's over HR. Met Tom, and Tom and I connected very well. And for the next 10 years, we helped Tom help his whole team build their leadership team. Yeah. And now that was on contingency. But it was just like retained.
Mm-hmm.
We knew when they called us and gave us an assignment, some
You were
confidential.
the one they chose. Yeah.
We worked through HR, but we had the direction from, operational and all the way up to the general manager.
Mm.
And
you said that came from a candidate who you were interviewing for another company.
we didn't recruit this individual. This individual answered an ad that we were running for a plant manager for another cosmetic company in Cincinnati at that time. And went through the interview process. It
wasn't chosen,
but he called me afterwards and said, I really would like to talk to you because we need more leadership here, and we're just not getting it. And they were probably the most selective company because being an Avon, they looked not just for the individual, but image was, everyone had suits on. It was a pristine place.
Mm.
It was at that moment, it was the largest cosmetic manufacturing facility in the world.
Mm.
So, it was 2 plants under one roof, manufacturing under one, distribution under one, and it was a blast, just a lot of fun, but a lot of work, and they were selective. So they broke me in, they broke our team in on how to be not just the resume, but character, and can you do the job, and what do you look like? And back then, I remember one candidate for a high level job had a beard, and when he walked in, I had to call and say, so help me out, because they had no beards back then. Everyone was older men were clean shaven, and but this guy was good enough and went through the process. He was the first individual in leadership that they hired with a beard, and he became very, very successful. And the company even moved to New York at their corporate manufacturing. So again, that's how things change.
Right.
But they were fun, and they, as I said, it wasn't retained, but it was based upon trust and results.
Mm-hmm.
We got the results for them. Yeah.
Was there any other client that had a similar story where you tried really hard to call into the organization and it took the right person to meet you to say, you know what, we could really use some help?
Yeah. Michael, we all learned early on, but I learned I learned early on that HR considered, human resources considered us as competition to them. That was the least thing we wanted them to feel, but that's how they felt. Because for most other recruiting companies, that's the way it was. Used to be a company in Cincinnati called Cincinnati Millicron. They were one of the biggest machine tool companies in the world, and I never could get through to the HR man. I always talked to the HR manager, and he said, "Mike, thanks for calling. I'll call you when I need you." And then I didn't go around him. I started getting calls from other directors and VPs based on referrals and saying, hey, I heard you help so-and-so. Can you help us? And I said, well, hold on. Yes, we can. Glad to meet with you, but HR won't, I can't do that without HR's approval. And they would all say, we'll take care of that. Okay. So I started working directly with the operational leaders. And I told them all, at each search, I'd say, you have to call Joe in HR to get his blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I can't work with you because he doesn't want us to. So that's what we did probably for, again, another 10 years with them. And, and then some of those leaders started leaving there, either to different divisions or different companies, and then they would call us and say, "Hey, can you help me here?"
Mm-hmm.
And so again, that was fun.
Yeah. I mean, I know probably 6 or 7 different organizations that all came from referrals, leaders, or relationships that worked at Millicron at one point who brought us along.
Mm-hmm.
I also will note that you did say that Tom at Avon was the head of HR, and he said, "I need your help."
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, he said, not as recruiters,
Sure.
but he said, yes,
Yeah.
we do need help.
Yeah.
And Tom, I worked with Tom for several years, and then he moved on to a hospital up in Ohio, and he brought us in there to help him. So that was when I was learning out, wow, as long as we can please customers, those customers are going to refer us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what helped the retained business is just happy customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. I think through, like, even as we celebrate our 50th, we're planning a dinner for clients who have interacted with us for 20 plus years. Right. And it's not every time in an organization you get the opportunity to know people who have worked with you for 30, 40 years. And it's quite a legacy and impact. Most hiring processes are broken. You spend months searching, waste time on wrong fit candidates, and still end up uncertain if you made the right choice. Our 4C recruiting process has been refined over 50 years placing executives. We look at character, culture, chemistry, and competency. This systematic approach ensures we find leaders who don't just have the right skills, but who truly bring the right value to achieve your organization's vision and mission. Let's take the guesswork out of hiring. Visit CentennialInc.com to learn how the 4C recruiting process can help you find your next great hire.
I keep a thing called a relationship ladder. And even with Avon, which was probably 1976, 77, when we started working with them, how many people ahead of Avon helped make those connections to get to Avon. We actually even hired at one of their HR managers at our company with the blessing of the company. He was leaving, and he said, he called me and said, I really would like to talk to you about your business. And he was with us a couple of years. And one thing he always did every morning was he always watched the stock market every day. So 2 years later, he left and went into the stock market business. Yeah. And he called me one day and said, I want you to know one difference. He said, like most recruiting firms, he said, here, the company, he said, we have to make 100 calls a day. Now, I will tell you, Josh, if I had to make 100 calls a day, I wouldn't have been doing what
a lot of calls.
But he said, that's what we have to do. And he said, that's the only part I don't like, but I love everything about the stock market. I said, oh, that's good. But he came from Avon, and that came from someone else, and that came from someone else. And yeah. Matter of fact, I just reminded, he was the individual who introduced me to a guy named Kent Friel, who he knew through another company. Kent became a major client of ours, introduced by Bob, and then became a strong advisor of mine over time, and then a great friend. And again, I need that relationship ladder to remind me, wow, here's why we have to keep meeting people, because we never know which one is going to be the one to call and say, hey, da da da. I said, wow, okay, da 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 da. Thinking, wow, that's where I'm thinking, oh Lord, thank you for, we got to keep. That's where keep the connections going, like Mr. Moore said. Keep things going, keep the relationships going on the ladder. Keep talking to people, and everything else will take care of itself.
Well, and that's the power of the relationship ladder that I believe that our team embodies the impact of all of these connections. I can even remember TJ Bug, who was with us for 20 years. And he would talk about like that first client engagement that didn't go as well. And then 11 other companies that came from that engagement where all these candidates were like, man, I just landed over here. I would love your help. I think that didn't go so well. I think the job ended up still getting filled. It just took a long time. Well, the beauty was he was meeting CFOs all over the region, and that basically built a 20-year success run of all these amazing relationships that he built into. And you can see that time and time again. We're living it now. We recently got a call from a client that the last search we ever did with the client was 11 years ago. And the chairman of the board, when they had a transition for a chief financial officer, talked to the head of HR, who's one of our great close relationships, that head of HR, but they just didn't have a leadership need for 11 years. They had their leadership team established, and they called us. And a client right now that we're working with that you supported for, you and Becky supported, you and Barry supported for
13 years.
13 years. We're working with an operational leader who we placed there 10 years ago, who recently moved on to a new role as president, moved from operations to become president of a company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And we're on our third executive search with him right now. So helping his leadership team build and grow. So it's just the power of relationships. Daniel Wechter, who was recently on, who's now the CEO of the Colorado Symphony. We met him when he moved here from Germany to run a packaging company in Cincinnati. And he's, one of my dearest friends and dearest colleagues. So it's just perpetual relationships. Uncle Mehmet. So to my children, Mehmet Yuksik is Uncle Mehmet. I think he's even going to be at Jacob's upcoming high school graduation party. We met him when he moved here from Istanbul to take over Perfetti Van Mel North America. At the time, it was Perfetti Van Mel USA, and he was there at the time they built it into Perfetti Van Mel North America. And my kids call him Uncle Mehmet. So just the power of friendships, these deep rooted friendships. I mean, some of my best friends in the world, some of your best friends in the world are people we met through serving through our family business, which is quite the honor.
Just just to piggyback on that, going back to Avon, the HR manager who came to work for us, not only introduced me to Kent Friel, but then Kent introduced me to a gentleman by the name of John Doerr. John Doerr was going through a transition, had been president of a company that got bought out and got moved back to Cincinnati. And so he was looking for a role, and Kent introduced me to John, and I helped John for 2 years, helped him network. He and his wife did not want to move. He had offers outside of Cincinnati, but they wanted to live here. And so I kept helping him network. And finally, he found a president's role here in Cincinnati. And the company you just mentioned, we worked with them we helped John build his leadership team over 13 years, part of it. And then also Ken Friel introduced us. We had a search going on for a VP of HR, and introduced us to another HR executive who was in transition, and wound up going with a company in Northern Kentucky as their VP of HR, and again brought because it was helping her with her transition, brought us in there, and we worked with them for 13 years until she retired. So again, it's just it's just amazing who the Lord brings to us, and then how we leverage that to other connections, and it just makes it fun. Not just getting results, but just fun building clients, but also some of those individuals are some of our best friends today. Yeah, that's just very exciting.
We're very, very blessed. So people ask me today, my wife and I, Amber and I, work and run and lead and our growing Centennial Talent Magnet Institute, the podcast and events business, the real estate that we own in Newport. But Amber and I started at Centennial to pay for ourselves to go through college. So at the time I was at Cincinnati State in landscaping and turf grass management, and Amber was at Northern getting her degree in psychology. We were working at Centennial as one of our many jobs to help pay for school and to save up money. And now, 26 years later, we own and are running the family business into the next generation. What was it like to you? Again, I was working at Centennial studying to go into turf grass and landscape management, which you were also supportive of. But what was it like to you watching me grow up in the business? Did you ever have early thoughts around like, oh, this could be next generation? Or did anyone else in the business have that opinion and perspective? So what was it like in your early years of me starting at Centennial? Or was I a pain in the ass all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. We may not have time to clarify all of that, but when you were interning with us, Michael, we were doing just that, just to help you with college and for you to get some just real life experience.
So I was first a college intern at Centennial.
Yeah. And part of that internship was technology. We needed someone to help us build our computers. So we just needed computer help. And back then, believe it or not, Michael, you were a techie and loved computers and loved doing war games with your friends and that part. So you got it. You were, and you came in and helped us. You and your friend helped us build our computers, and from there, then you started asking questions about. I think if I recall, you read a vision that I had written, and you said, "Tell me more about this," and could I help here? And you started helping in marketing, and you started helping in different areas of the business. And then one day, one of my key advisors walked in the office and said to me, Mike, have you ever consider Michael as a recruiter? And I said, no. And he said, I think you'd make a good one. And so I went to you and said, hey, what about, learning recruiting? And you said, no, I'm willing to learn it, and you became one of our best recruiters. So I learned early on that you picked up on things very quickly, and you had a great work ethic. You worked hard at everything you did. You were successful at everything you did. And I'm thinking, okay. And then as time went on, when I was 57, we had just moved to the Towers of Kenwood, new office space, and two different advisors of mine I had invited in to see our new space. Again, Ken Friel was one, David Kynell was one, and separate meetings, but each one of them, while we're in those meetings, said, great space. So Mike Senior, what's your succession plan? And I turned to him and laughed at both times, because I said I'd been helping with companies with succession planning for many years. I just had never thought about it for myself until they asked me. And I said, wow, that's a good question, wise question. And I have not thought about it, but it's time to do that. Yeah. And so that's when they both recommended that I contact the Goering Center to talk about that. And that's when I talked to your mom and said, if you have anyone in mind, who do we know, that part? And we both came up with the same individual to at least talk to. And that was you, having no idea if that would be something else you'd be interested in, because you enjoyed recruiting at the time. Yeah, you did, So came to you and said, have you were working, I don't know if you recall, but you were working with Pam Beek at the time in with some sales coaching. And I had asked you, I said, would you, I'm looking at succession planning for myself. Would that be something that could be of interest to you? And you were wise and said, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to tell you. So I said, well, you and I will go through the Goering Center, and they have a whole thing on succession planning, and they'll teach us on succession on my generation, your generation. And at the end, you should have an idea of, that's something I would be interested in, or no, not for me, because they will teach you that many individuals become their parent's successor because of their parent, to please their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what I wanted. I wanted something that I didn't care what you did. I told you and Amber that multiple times. Whatever the Lord has for you, that's what I want you to do. But this is one thing that I'd like you to check out and see if it'd be interesting, to look at the good, bad, and the ugly of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we got started.
Mm-hmm.
The Goering Center also taught me that when you do this, don't do it yourself. Don't do it by yourself. Find someone who can help facilitate that process. And we brought in our great advisor and coach, Lynn Rule, to help us with the succession and to make it a healthy process. And that's how we got started.
Mm-hmm. The Goering Center has made a profound impact. I'm thankful to Walt Mole, who said he was the advisor who came to you to said, I think Michael could do this recruiting thing, which I'm very thankful that he did, and has stood alongside of our family business now for at least 20 years.
Yeah, 20 plus years.
Supporting us and working with us.
And one additional comment when you said, what does that mean? One of the things I shared with you is, well, it means that you will spend some time learning to develop business, which means going out of the office and meeting people.
Mm-hmm.
And you cringed.
Mm-hmm.
I know, believe it or not. You wanted to stay in, and you said to me, paraphrasing, Dad, you continue bringing in the business, and I'll continue filling it. And I said, well, that's fine, but not if you're going to be my successor. And I said, you'll have to learn, you'll have to get out. I'll introduce you to my connections, and they'll start introducing you to their connections, and you'll either love it or you won't.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, that's okay, but you have to learn it so you can teach and train other team members to do it. And, I laugh at that now. Anyone that's listening would laugh at that now, because now you're out in the marketplace everywhere and don't want to do recruiting because you love it, meeting people and developing relationships and businesses, but back then you didn't even know if you really would have preferred staying inside,
Mm-hmm.
but Mom and I both thought, wow, you've got the capability. Now it's going to be whether you got to love it. If you don't love it, then you got to do something else.
Yeah.
But we thought, this is worth the investment on both sides to see how this works.
We know that hosting the important meetings in the right space is a key component of great outcomes for you and your team. And because of that, I am excited that the Living Room is sponsoring the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. For over 12 years, the Living Room in Cincinnati has created truly intentional environments for everyone from Fortune 500 companies to small organizations and churches. Think stunning historical buildings, natural lighting, full on-site hospitality, and curated home-cooked meals that elevate every gathering. Because when your environment is right, your outcomes are better. Visit hellolivingroom.com/unconventional today and book your next meeting. You've always invested in strategic planning. So I remember there's plan years. When I first joined, you had just engaged Chuck Proudfit to help us with a strategic plan. He's helped us with some branding that still stays with us. Now our proprietary 4C recruiting process was built around work in a strategic planning session that Chuck was leading, where he came up with his alliteration of what you're really describing is these 4 C's: character, culture, chemistry, competence. And it has been with us now. It's what we're known for. Companies call us and say, hey, I really need to use you in your 4C process, AKA for your retained search expertise, because we put so much into this 4C recruiting process. But you also we stood up a board of advisors around us to help us through our succession too. What was your greatest learning from that board of advisors? Doug Bolton, Tony Schweier, David Kynell, Karen Crone, and Dr. Janet Reed.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I had to go back further than that first. Okay. Because when an important part of our history was right after 9/11. Okay. Right after 9/11, it changed the world. It changed our country. It changed our business. It changed everything. And part of it, we lost 3 major clients during that phase. It had nothing to do with us. It's just because of what had happened. And so I was looking and said, wow, we've got to, again, think about how we can change to move forward and, for our future. And that's when I called Chuck Proudfit and said, Chuck, right now, we can't afford to bring you in, but we need help. I need help thinking through about our future. Just rethinking. How can we pivot right now? And Chuck said, well, tell you what, I need business. So you help me get some business and I'll help you with your planning. So Chuck came in and spent 2 years with us. The first year we met every month as a team, and Chuck was big on for this and for that. And you're right. When he listening to us, he said, oh, you've got 4 C's. And 25 years later, we still have 4 C's, 4 C's. So I've always been thankful for Chuck just helping us just in general, but, in so many ways over that time. Always value him and still value him as a advisor and close friend part. But that helped us. That helped us get moving towards, and that's when we talked about back in the early 2000 is when we talked about the vision of what became TMI. But again, Chuck came to me and said, Mike, because I had been approached by another individual to help open a coaching side of our business, and that excited me. But Chuck said, Mike, right now, the company can't afford you to focus there. You've got to keep the business. You got to survive Centennial, and right now, Centennial depends on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't start implementing the vision at that time. That took later on when you started TMI. Part of it. The other piece of that is I realized that I think of the story of King David and his son Solomon, where the Lord said, I want a house built for me, but David, you're not going to be the one to build it. Your son is. And that's how I felt. Mike, you got the vision, but you're not going to implement it. You know, your son will. You know, and you have. So that's how that got started as far as the vision piece, part of it. And again, Chuck was I didn't like Chuck's advice, but I followed Chuck's advice, and I think it was the right advice at that time. Yeah.
And then once, so thank you, Chuck, for all of your continued help and support and blessings you've poured on our family and our business. As we navigated, let's say, the next 5 to 6 years, that's when we kind of put in a new board, a board of advisors to come alongside of, at the time when Chuck was working with us, I was just beginning. And then when we got through the Goering Center's work, one of the things that came out of that is we really need to put a board of advisors, non-family, around us to help us through our transition, to help you through your transition, to help us through what were some of your major takeaways from that experience. I think they were with us for 3 years. Like what did you feel like we gained the most from having that group of advisors with us?
One thing, it was time for you to have a board of advisors, okay, for your own development part. I've always had key advisors, just never a formal board of advisors. So you needed, you needed that yourself, and I believe you got great advice during that time. The biggest challenge that at that time was the biggest concern that I had was starting a new service, which, working with David Kynell in strategic planning, it was time for us to diversify. So good timing for that. All of our concerns at that time was starting it, but making sure Centennial stayed profitable while we started. That was the biggest challenge and concern, part of it. But other than that, they were instrumental in getting us going on thinking through and you starting to develop a new service for us.
Yeah, I've shared. I mean, the podcast exists because Janet Reed thought we should either write a book or launch a podcast. This has been 8 years of us doing that now. To episode 249 right here. That wouldn't have happened if it weren't for that group.
Yep.
I wonder if Talent Magnet Institute, if Centennial would have launched it, or if we still would be talking about it if it weren't for this group. I certainly know the same stories about, like, why did we end up moving from Kenwood and buying a building in Newport? Because this board recommended that we buy a building and invest in our future and secure the, not lease, but own the real estate. We ended up buying a really big building. Now we lease it out to others, and we have an events business inside of it because it's a gorgeous building that we don't use 24/7. But Talent Magnet Institute has now, we just crossed over the 120 client mark in our lifespan. And that's 120 clients, some that directly overlap with Centennial's customers, some that don't at all, some that met us through leadership, and then bring us in, some who start with leadership coaching or team building, facilitation. Can you come in and work with our executive team to help us be more functional and more impactful? And can you help our directors and VPs learn what it's like to really lead with profound impact and have, help our leaders think about unlocking the potential that's inside our organization. And it can ultimately result into, and can you help us find a chief commercial officer? Would you be able to help us find a new president or a VP of manufacturing or a head of sales or a North American, marketing lead? And on the search side, it's, wow, you guys do this for us. Could you help us onboard this new leader? Could you help us coach and develop the team that's going to be working with said leader that you placed? Can you help us go through cultural transformation? I always describe it. I just, a couple weeks ago was in a presentation and I put, it started with an asterisk, and I had an asterisk in the presentation, and our marketing leader was like, I think you have this as a placeholder. I'm like, no, Talent Magnet Institute started as an asterisk in our strategic plan that said, asterisk, help bring more value to our A clients. And that's all that asterisk was. And then over time, they need coaching help. They need onboarding help. They need to work through some, every team, every family has dysfunction. They need help working through some dysfunction and provide clarity and work on their culture and all of those that underneath that asterisk we would keep track of. We talked about a podcast, writing books, developing content, all underneath that asterisk. I mean, I have the version of the plan from 2012 to 2016.
Yep.
And then here we are, right? In a world where our conversations, I just had an amazing guest, in the last season, or this current season, season 3. She just texted me last week. She just took a big promotion in town as CEO, and she shared with me via text, like, the episode I recorded with you unlocked something special in me. We talked about self-leadership and how important self-leadership is, because too often leaders running around in the hamster wheel, we're focusing on everyone else but ourselves because we don't have time to think about self. And she thanked me in a text message recently about, just last week, about, hey, I want to thank you for that episode because it unlocked something inside of me, and I'm really excited to take this new CEO promotion. That came from a guest on the show, let alone the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who see our content. Again, this is part of the genius of Dr. Janet Reed, is she knows that because she's lived it before, which is why you have advisors who have been, Dr. Reed sold a business to Korn Ferry, which was one of their very first non-executive search acquisitions. So she knows a pathway of growth and how to make profound impact, and has made a lot of impact on our listeners, on our community. And then you have the Dougs and the Karens and the Davids and the Tonys who are like taught us how to think about business differently into this next generation, see around the corner.
Michael, one of the, to piggyback on that, I always try to remember different situations that got us where we are. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of our first TMI clients was a company in Texas.
Yeah.
Referred by a search client who called and said, talking, and they said, "Oh, wow, you need to hire a VP of, I think at HR, but a VP."
Yeah.
And when they called you, I think you went there and met with them.
Flew to Houston. Yeah.
Flew down there to Houston, met with them. And while you were there, you said, we can help you, but don't. But I would advise you, this is not the right time. You need a plan, a strategic plan, an HR plan, first. And and in the past, we would have done that just in our conversations, but the owner or the CEO or whoever said, "Wow, can you help us with that?" And you said, "Yes, we can." And you developed one of our first TMI clients that way, and you did the plan, and then they came back, and then you did the search, and your client came back and said, "Wow, that was wise to do the plan first, or we may have hired the wrong individual." You know, and that was extremely exciting to see. Yes, that's how that's how we picture it working.
Yeah. And I remember my emotion as I remember coming back from that trip, sending a text to Janet Reed saying, "Janet, I think I just closed TMI's first client. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like is the inside baseball." And and I remember hopping on the phone the night I got back really late, like 7, 8 o'clock, talking to her about it. Like, all right, map it out. And then I remember calling one of our consulting friends saying, "Hey, if I do this, I think I'm going to land it," because Chris, the CEO at this company, really he appreciated the fact that we didn't say, "Let's just recruit your head of HR." That was the whole reason why they flew me down there. And meeting with Chris and his leadership team, they're like, "That's what we need. We need a plan. We don't even have a plan. We don't even know who we would hire." And we did some cultural audit work with them. We developed what we call our talent strategy roadmap from that customer. Like, this is what you really need to align your strategic plan to your people. And you got to know all of that to know the kind of HR leader you want to hire. But I remember the inside baseball part of it is going, "Oh man, I think we just did this." And then what we learned from that, we very quickly had another director of HR call us and said, "I could use your help. We're trying to recruit 270 people in manufacturing. And we realized we've got a leadership problem that we got to fix first." And we were like, "Well, what's your roadmap?" "We don't have a roadmap. We just were told we just need to hire all these people and there's no roadmap." And that was our second client, who was a very large customer. Those two customers really anchored the vision of like our board being able to say, "Guys, we told you were already doing this. You were just connecting other people to it," or telling your client they should do it, but then not giving them the resources to execute. It also came from, if you remember, we had a consultant, Barbara Eris, go out and do a voice of the customer out of this board and Goering Center succession planning. We had a consultant, we hired a consultant to go meet with customers to get feedback from Habegger about our succession, to get feedback from Perfetti about our succession, to talk to Transfreight about our succession. And they gave great feedback, some of which was, "I kind of wish Centennial would just help us do more." And then, okay, well, let's add that to the asterisk. Well, what does that mean? I remember calling my recruiting coach, Gary Stabel, who's out in San Francisco. And I remember calling him saying, "Gary, we keep getting asked to do this coaching thing. And we think our clients need a strategy before hiring people." And Gary saying, again, "Stay close to your knitting." We decided to stay focused on leadership roles, not to go into staffing, but to focus on leadership. So like, that's our focus. Let's expand to help leaders lead better and more effectively. But as you can see, there's a lot of human names involved in all of these conversations. Part of it's kind of the Sipple way to get insights and inputs from others, but it's also important. I wanted to draw that out because our listeners need to know, like, you need advisors around you. You need the right people who kick you in the pants and make you do something that's uncomfortable and that you have talked about for a while and decided, you know what, we should do this. It's not been easy. There have been years the Centennial hasn't been profitable. it has been challenging on the family to start a startup and buy a building and build a business. But I call it God's, the God winks you get along the way. We just had one in the last couple of weeks that was like, all right, thank you, Lord. That's just another confirmation. Stay in this lane. I've got you. Keep focusing on people and what you all are called to do. So, Dad, how do you define, when you hear the phrase unconventional leader, what does unconventional leadership mean to you?
To me, I go back even 50 years. For me, Mr. Morris was an unconventional leader. He wanted to do things the right way, a better way, and not thinking, in other words, he thought outside the box. But he also did it in a way that he had to make sure that outside the box was going to be healthy for the company also and for the clients. And to me, that we've carried that on forever. We've always learned quickly that we have to listen for understanding for the clients, and then truly, understanding the client. Sometimes we have to help them understand themselves, even with a search or whatever the assignment is. We have to invest time to ask them, question them, discuss with them, so they come back and say, wow. And sometimes even, a search, present a couple of candidates to say, just give us some feedback. Are we in the right? These are not bullseyes. Just give us some feedback. And after talking to us, say, wow, we're going to change a little. We're going to tweak what we're looking for. That helped us. And always going from the target to the bullseye on what the client really wants, excuse me, versus what they think they want. To me, that's unconventional, rather than, again, just sending resumes or just, telling them, here's what we're going to do. Just continually asking them, what do you need? What do you want? And helping them get clarity on what they truly want and need. To me, that's all unconventional. That is not found, that they don't find in other companies or other leaders or other service companies.
What makes you, when you look at Centennial today and Talent Magnet Institute today and the Unconventional Leadership Podcast today, what makes you most proud, personally most proud, when you look at what we lead and what our family legacy is?
Bear with me on this. The thing that I was proud of is just us learning and realizing how faithful God has been for 50 years. That's the biggest learning. At my age, looking back, I'm thinking, oh, wow, Lord, thank you for all the ups and downs. I mean, we've had plenty of our downs too, but He's always been faithful and this has always brought us through. Yeah. And then proud. Oh, the next thing I'm proud of is the young lady I'm married to, who's been with me for 50 years, and 45 years, helping us with the business. I would not have been doing this without her love and support all these years. To me, she's been the heartbeat of the company for many, many years. Now she's proud of having your wife, our daughter, be the heartbeat of our company, and we're both proud of, again, I made it very clear early on that we wanted you, but we didn't force you to even join our company or, be with our company. but we couldn't be more proud of all that. But we've also said to you and Amber, if the Lord ever opens some other door, don't hesitate if that's what the Lord wants for you to do that. I felt the same way. Even before starting with Centennial, Mom and I said, Lord, if the longer I'm going to be here, I'm still open to, if you close this door, just pray that I'll anticipate the next door you're opening. For 50 years, he's kept the door open. And, wow, thank you, Lord. But now I take one day at a time, looking back. So thank you, Lord, for our business, all of our teams that we've had for 50 years, of various teams, our team today. Thank you for the leadership that we've had in the company. Thank you for Jim and Mary as founders. Thank you for, having our son, having you, not just join us, but now running the company, owning the company, developing, TMI along with Centennial. And thank you for all the many, many clients. Thank you, Lord, for the clients, just all the people. Very humbling to all the friends, the wonderful friends that we have developed and cherished that have come through our company. That's how we originally met them. I'm thinking, wow, Lord, thank you. So, and that's we couldn't be more blessed. So we've had a vehicle to do all that with that was created, initially by Jim and Mary.
Is there anything today that still keeps you up at night about our business?
There's nothing that keeps me up at night about our business. As long as we continue, as long as you continue, and Amber, I think the best thing you have going for yourself is Amber. Okay?
Amen.
Like the best thing I had going for myself was your mom. Is your mom. As long as we continue to seek the Lord's will, seek the Lord's direction, his guidance, and the wise people he brings around us, I will sleep well at night.
Awesome. What does legacy mean to you personally? Not as a concept, like not what do you hope our legacy is, but what does legacy mean to you personally? Mike Sipple Sr.
Well, Michael, I had to go back to what I've enjoyed doing, not just the search work over our many years, helping clients solve, the leadership, challenges they have. But I've also thoroughly enjoyed working with business owners, CEOs, C-level leaders, helping them with their businesses, but also their careers. I mean, we've had many clients who call and say, Mike, I need to talk to you personally because I'm thinking about my future, and then their personal lives, especially now at my age, still helping a few clients, business owners and CEOs think through their retirement and succession, their personal retirement and their business succession, and keeping all that moving forward. In other words, I believe that will become part of TMI's services in the future, because more and more individuals are hitting retirement age. And many of them, I don't know most, but many of them have not thought about, like I hadn't thought about retirement. I hadn't thought about succession. That was the furthest thing from my mind. But now helping them say, have you thought about, retirement succession, and having them say, wow, no, I really haven't, and helping them through that. Because I consider that a combination of retirement and succession planning, and individually and together, for, I would say, I just think back at so many leaders, business owners, CEOs who got to that stage and had not thought about it, where, again, I've always been there to help them through that at that time, just to help them, and now there's more of them that need help. And, and want help. Not everybody wants help. Okay, I'm good in that part, but most individuals who don't go through some type of planning for their own legacy, they, what's the word? They're sorry for not doing it later, and as they grow older. Yeah, they wish they would have done it earlier. They just had no one's asked them about it. No one, again, like myself, no one had asked me about it. Even though I did it for others, I hadn't thought about it for myself. And they need somebody to ask them about it, and then say, hey, can you help me with that process? But yes, we can help you there. Yeah. I think, and going back again to Jim and Mary, I believe that Mary, can't speak for Jim, but I believe Mary would be very pleased today on what Centennial was, is, and has become. I believe she would be very pleased, and especially with with you, because she's probably the first one that said, I see Michael in the future, running this company. That was before anyone thought of it. Yeah. He was very wise and very insightful.
I think that was when I was even a little kid, let alone a teenager or a grown adult.
Yeah.
When people look back 50 years from now,
50 years from now,
what do you hope they say about Centennial?
Just the difference we've made. That, I mean, even then, just looking back 50 years now, we have so many people who we get phone calls from. They let us know, say, wow, you don't realize how much of an impact you've made on my life over these years of something you said or advised or whatever, 20 years ago. And that just fills my heart, when I hear that, whether it's from me or you or anyone. I'm thinking, wow, I'll give you one, it's not 50 years from now, but just one example of an individual who got referred to me many years ago, looking for a job. I helped him network, and helped him get into a new, didn't place him there, but just helped him network into a new opportunity. He was there and then moved on to another opportunity. I was there for years, and then I get a call from him saying, just like to meet with you. When I met with him, he said, I just diagnosed with cancer. And then as time went on, I would visit, we would visit together. But then one day I got a call from his wife saying, Mike, can you come? He's now in hospice. Can you come to our house? When I went there, she and he said, I just want to let you know, we never placed him anywhere, just helped him in his career and his life. So I just want to let you know the impact you've had on my, in my life. 50 years from now, that's the type of thing that we'll forget many of the searches we've done, but people don't forget how you made them feel, what you did for them as in their career, business, and especially their personal lives. That's what we do, that we help people improve their lives, be more successful in their lives. They said it can be their business, maybe their career, but just their lives, and that's what they remember. They call and say, wow, just want to, I don't know if you call, but we've made a difference. We're making a difference. And 50 years from now, I hope we're still making a difference. Might be doing something very different, based upon the marketplace. Mm-hmm. But we want to make a difference in people's lives. And the Lord will continue blessing us to do that.
Yeah, so often I get reminded, including just yesterday, I was with a CEO who wanted me to tell you hello. And I get that often. It's like, oh, your dad made this one connection, or your dad was so kind to me when I was going through this transition or this difficult thing, or when we were thinking about this thing that felt impossible. And somebody said, you should talk to Mike Sipple Sr. And the power of the personal connection far surpasses the placements we make. Even that one, the thing that's interesting to me with the work we do with TMI is it's like that personal sit down, because so often we're coaching or we're working with a group of people and we're having that group mentorship conversation. And in the searches, as you're unpacking what someone really wants in their career, sometimes you're convincing them that what you just said and what this is not a fit. So it's no judgment on you. But in those not a fit discussions is all of this mentorship and coaching and guidance and wisdom. And you've done that with, I can't even imagine how many people over your career that you've made an impact on. I know one of the things that I'm so grateful for is you and Mom's consistent focus on each other and how that has impacted team members that have worked with us in the past, alumni. I have another really good friend who hired an individual who used to work for us for four years in his career, Mitch, who's now my buddy Danny's COO. And, Danny was like, I know you guys, and I have never even worked with you guys because of how much Mitch talks about the impact and the lessons learned and the things that we do. And you hear this even from alumni who have been on our team, not just people that we sit down with, of the relationship you and I have. And as difficult as a father-son relationship can be, people take away value from how we work together, and we work hard at it. We have people who help us, who coach us through. And also the focus you've always said of like, I can replace a business partner. I don't want to replace a son. So that piece also resonates with us if we've thought through our transition, to give us the freedom to encourage Amber and I to not just get so caught up in running the company. Right now, while we're talking, she's at a mastermind group, helping support as an operations leader, our mastermind that's happening today. She runs the company, operations, finance, all run through her. And yet we just got asked to host a couples retreat in Wyoming in February to take 7 other couples with us. And we said yes to that. Like, we would love to try to go invite 7 other couples to do a trip out west, because we try to put our marriage first, because I see that you and Mom work so hard at that. So thank you for that. So one last thing. So the next episode is episode 250. Episode 250, I'm going to attempt to sit down alone and do a solo episode, which I've never done before. What is one charge you could give me? So one thing for me to carry into the conversation, it clicks. The episode 250 is going to come out specifically in like the first week of June, which will be our first week of 51 years of service. So it's a little call to action in the next 50 years. What would you encourage me to carry into that conversation for the next 50 years?
Let me go back 50 years real quick. The one thing that was missing for me working with Mr. Morris was the spiritual aspect. Not with Mary, saw that spiritual aspect from day one, but Mr. Morris was all business. And when Mary asked me to run the company, I shared with her, I said, Mary, my spiritual values, and I'm going to be taking that into this role. Are you okay with that? And she was more than okay with that. Okay. I didn't, no reason to comment on, that was between her and Jim, but, I sit here today, 50 years later, saying, Lord, you've been so faithful. Without your direction, your guidance, everything, we wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here today, doing what we're doing. I cannot think of anything that I would, and I have to admit that I'm even stronger on that. I'm stronger on it every year now as I get older. I believe wisdom comes with age. And looking back, when I was your age or younger, I would have said, look what we're doing. Look what I'm doing. Look what we're doing. Today I said, I just have to say, first, Lord, thank you for what you're doing. So I would challenge you and expect you to say, look to the Lord's example, look to his word, his guidance, and be faithful to him, and he will continue blessing, blessing us. I think back to probably when I was about your age, I got introduced to a gentleman by the name of Bob Hartenstein. Mm. I would have to go back even earlier than that. It was probably not too far after I became president. A good friend called and said, Mike, I want to invite you to a group of men. Got a friend who's going to be leading a Bible or a book called Business Through the Bible, or Business Through the Bible. In other words, running a business God's way. And I needed that at that time. Mm. I didn't have a lot of believing friends around me at that time, and so I said, "Oh, wow, I'll be there." Anyway, it was a year's worth. Every month we met. I had a film, and then had a discussion, and that started my relationship. How much I appreciated Bob taking us through that, and the friends I met through that, and just the guidance and direction that God gave me through his word on how to run a business, and it's just as important how to be a better godly man, husband, now dad, now grandpa, papa, and just overall leader. And I've never forgotten that. Bob was a precious friend still today. Yeah, he and I communicate almost every day in some way. And he's invited me to two things out in Montana that he holds for men that are, again, retiring. Mm. But the schedules haven't worked out for me yet.
Yeah, you should go.
Apart. Mm. And and that includes fly fishing. That's probably something that, I may be doing something else during the fly fishing time. But anyway, that's the biggest thing. I think that for me, this has not been just a business. It's been a way of life for for our family, for our team members, for people we help, we touch in many different ways. And I said, Lord, thank you. That's all I can do. And I would hope that never goes away. We can always make a profit, but we want to help make lives and help build lives and help people be more successful in their businesses, careers, and personal lives. And no matter what we're doing for them, the business looks different today than it did before, and it may look different. Yeah, that's okay. Market changes. But as a leader, I would have to say, the one other thing is another precious individual I've never met, a gentleman named Tony Evans. He's a pastor, teacher. He's on radio, TV, but I heard him in Promise Keepers many years ago talking about leadership and talking to at the Cincinnati Riverfront Stadium men on our priorities. And he said, challenged all of us. He said, most of you, if you said, what's your priorities, you'd say God, family, career. And he said that day, I would challenge you. I found that that's not the case. It's typically maybe God, then career, and then family. And that day he was speaking to me. He said, you can be a successful business person, but if you're not a successful or a godly business person, if you're not a godly dad, if you're not a godly husband, it all starts with being a godly man. And that made sense to me that day. Wow. I want to be a godly man so that I can be a godly husband and dad and papa and business leader. I've been working on that for the last 30 years. Last 40 years. Last 40 years. And that's what I do. You have, Michael, you have so much influence on so many people now that you can make such a difference in their lives. And, part of the legacy is that I want to see that continue, that we look to God for what he wants us to do and how he wants us to impact lives, starting with yourself, as yourself and your husband and dad, and eventually, Papa.
So 50 years. My dad said yes to something he couldn't quite see 50 years ago, which was applying for this small ad in the Kentucky Post. Because he did that, I get to do what I do today. You get to listen to what you're listening to today. Somewhere out there, a leader we will never meet is going to be shaped by a conversation that started from that 1975 first handshake as he walked into his office. That's a legacy. That's not a building. It's not a logo. It's not a balance sheet. It's not a trademark. It's the people who say yes before us and before the proof shows up. So the next episode is episode 250. We're going to be kicking off season 4. And for the first time in a long time, it's going to be just me. No guest, no co-host, just what this conversation unlocked in me and what I'm hoping to carry with me into the next 50 years of this work. I hope you'll be there. To my dad, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for saying yes. I want to say thank you for staying in all of the challenges and turmoil that existed in those first weeks, months, years of what we do today at Centennial. And for still being the first person that I get the privilege and pleasure of still calling when I run into something that I don't know what to do next. So I love you, Dad. I thank you, Mom. I thank you, Amber. And I thank you to all of our team, our clients, our friends, our relationships, this great community. I thank you to all of the associations and organizations that still today we participate in. And you've heard those referenced throughout the conversation, the power of community and connection. So I look forward to seeing you all in episode 250 and look forward to the next 50 years. Hey, can I ask you a favor? Can you please hit subscribe or follow on any platform that you're listening or watching this episode? Our goal is to connect with you, to bring additional value to you, to bring additional topics to you, and we can do that more effectively if you hit subscribe or follow. Thank you so much.